He rode into town looking for a bed, not a bride. By sundown, they had him in front of a preacher, marrying a woman who never said a word. No name, no smile. Just a veil and a silver ring that burned cold on his hand. That night, with the storm pounding at the cabin walls and the lantern flickering between them, she finally spoke. "You'll die in 5 days," she whispered, "just like the last one." And outside, in the dark, something was already listening. The storm hadn't let up since sunset. Wind clawed at the wooden slats of the one-room cabin, rattling loose shingles and carrying the sharp tang of distant rain through the cracks in the window panes. Inside, the flame of a single oil lantern sputtered, casting long shadows that danced across the rough pine walls like ghosts pacing before a gallows. The drifter sat at the edge of the bed, boots still on, spine rigid. He hadn't unpacked his saddlebag, hadn't loosened the iron buckle at his belt. Dust from the trail clung to him like old regrets. Across the room, in a straight-backed chair angled just outside the lantern's glow, she sat stiller than silence itself. The veil she wore cream once, now the gray of ash hung over her face, unmoved by the breeze threading beneath the door. She hadn't spoken all evening. Not when they were declared man and wife by the preacher with the milky eye. Not when the townsfolk offered hushed congratulations with eyes turned downward. Before we ride into the judgment at the canyon past the boy's breath hanging by a thread, the warrior's silence louder than any verdict. Take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. These stories aren't just tales of survival, they're flickers of humanity in places the world left behind. Your support keeps them burning. One click helps us walk deeper into forgotten dust, stand longer in front of drawn rifles, and tell the truths buried beneath silence. Thank you. Not when they rode together to this cabin at the edge of the tree line, where even the coyotes seemed to keep their distance. He'd thought maybe it was shyness, maybe grief, though no one said for what, maybe fear of him. He hadn't wanted this marriage either, but the offer had been too practical to ignore. Land, shelter, and something like companionship for a man running low on both bullets and reasons to keep moving. The town needed someone to marry her. She needed someone to marry. That was all they'd said. He hadn't asked what came before. Now he was starting to wonder if he should have. The wind moaned again, deeper this time, almost like a voice caught in the timber bones of the place. He leaned forward slightly, elbows on knees, watching her unmoving form. "You cold?" he asked, voice low. No answer. "I can light the stove if you want, or I can sleep out in the barn, if it makes you easier." Still nothing, just the sound of wind. And then, "You'll die in 5 days, she said. Her voice didn't match the storm. It was too calm, too certain. A match struck in a mine shaft, just like the last one. He didn't move, not a blink. His fingers curled slightly, but he kept his voice flat. "The last what?" She didn't answer, didn't shift, didn't so much as breathe louder. Just let the words settle like cold ash on the space between them. He stood slowly, not sudden, not loud. A hand hovered near the Colt on his hip, not drawing, just remembering it was there. He stepped forward until the lantern lit her veil, her shoulders, her hands resting limp in her lap. "Who was the last one?" he asked, quieter now. A flash of lightning lit the room for a second longer than it should have. In that moment, behind the veil, her eyes gleamed, not with malice, not with fear, but with something worse, resignation. She turned her head toward the window. The rider was already out there. She didn't need to say it. The storm outside surged. The lantern flickered once, then went out. The sun hung low and mean, casting everything in a burnt gold that made the dirt look blood-warmed. His horse was limping from a stone caught too long under hoof, and his canteen had given up 6 miles back. The town was the kind that didn't show up on most maps, just a crosshatch of splintered buildings sunken into the land like they were ashamed to be standing. No signs, no banners, not even the lazy swing of a saloon door. Just a silence too heavy for the hour. The drifter eased off the saddle, boots striking dust that puffed up and didn't settle. He tied the reins to the post outside what passed for a general store, though its windows were boarded from the inside. The porch creaked with every step like it hadn't held a living man in a week. He stepped through the door and into the kind of quiet that felt rehearsed. Heads turned, but slowly, like each person had to decide first whether they wanted to be seen watching him. Behind the counter, a woman with a stained apron and eyes too sharp for her age gave a brittle smile. "You from the north?" she asked, as though it mattered. "No," he said. "Just passing through. Horses lame. Looking for water. A place to rest up a night." "Plenty of empty homes," she said too quickly, then caught herself. "Or one, at least." Something about the way she said it pulled every eye in the store back to their work. A boy stacking cans suddenly remembered he was meant to sweep. An old man behind a barrel spat into a cup, missing entirely. The woman leaned in. "You want land?" He blinked. "Land? Acres, cabin, river access. All of it signed over legal." Her voice dropped even lower. "You marry her, it's yours." He didn't ask who. He didn't need to. She just nodded, almost a flinch, toward the far edge of town, where the trees began and the light started to die. "She's quiet, doesn't ask for much. Town'll draw up the papers. Hell, we'll throw in a meal. Just say yes before sundown." Behind her, the boy had stopped sweeping again. His mouth was slightly open. The old man had gone still too, hand wrapped around his cup like he was remembering something he couldn't forget. The drifter rubbed the back of his neck, the trail grit still clinging to his collar. His instincts pricked like they always did when something didn't line up, when folks smiled too wide or spoke too soft. But he also knew what it meant to be turned away, what it meant to sleep with your boots on and your hand on the handle of your only friend. The woman's offer wasn't just strange, it was desperate. And desperation meant fear, not of him, of something else. He should have walked, should have tipped his hat and kept on down the road toward the canyon. But her voice had caught on the word quiet like it meant more than it said. And that was what got him. "All right," he said, voice steady. "I'll meet her." The woman exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for a week. "You're a good man," she said. He didn't feel like one. But he followed her out anyway, toward the trees, toward the cabin, toward the woman with no name. The ceremony was over before he had time to wonder what it meant. The preacher spoke fast, like someone afraid of being caught mid-sentence by something watching from the tree line. No hymns, no blessings, no witnesses but three. The woman from the general store, the boy with the broom, and the preacher himself, who never once looked at either bride or groom. The bride stood still throughout, her face veiled in gauze that caught the sunlight in soft grays. Her hands were folded, unmoving, as if even the act of fidgeting had been bled out of her long ago. When it came time for vows, no one asked her to speak. No one expected it. She didn't nod, didn't even twitch. Just stood there like a carved figure at a grave. And when the preacher said, "By the authority of the township," his voice cracked like a dry twig. Then came the ring. It wasn't part of the original deal. No one had mentioned it. The woman from the store produced it, wrapped in a square of cloth, and handed it to the bride like she was afraid to touch it too long. The bride turned to him slowly, deliberately, and reached out. The band was silver, but not bright. It had an old luster, a dull sheen like it had lived too many stories already. Strange markings curled around its surface, glyphs or letters in a language that didn't belong here. When she slid it onto his finger, it felt too tight for a second too long, like it had to learn his skin before it would sit. And it was cold. Not metallic cold, not desert night cold. Cold, like something buried deep in a mountain for centuries, He winced, just slightly. She didn't notice, or didn't care. The preacher cleared his throat and declared them bound. That was the word he used, bound, not Wednesday. Then he stepped back fast, as if the air between them had become dangerous. It was the boy who approached after. Small, no older than 10, with dirt on his cheeks and a silence in his eyes too heavy for his age. He tugged at the drifter's coat, waited until he looked down, then leaned in close enough for breath to fog his lapel. "They don't live long," the boy whispered. His voice was so soft it could have been mistaken for wind. The drifter said nothing, just stared down at the boy, then over at the preacher, who was already packing up his book, and the woman, who wouldn't meet his gaze. The bride hadn't moved an inch. By dusk, they were alone. They rode out to the cabin in silence. Her horse kept pace with his without effort. She knew the trail blind, and though her hands held the reins loose, the animal never strayed once. It was like the land bent around her presence, like it feared her too. At the cabin door, she dismounted first. Waited. He could have left. Nothing tethered him but the ring. No child, no contract. Just an ache that hadn't gone away since the boy's warning. Just the image of her eyes beneath that veil, cold, yes, but not cruel. Flint, not ice, a survivor's eyes. Inside, she lit no candles, didn't eat, didn't speak. Still, he stayed. Sat in the same room, with her silence. Let the night settle like dust around them both. Because some men run from fear. Others listen to it. On the first morning, he woke to silence so deep it felt rehearsed. No birdsong, no creak of floorboards from her steps. Just the hush of wind threading through cracked wood, and the distant groan of trees shifting under the weight of memory. She wasn't in the bed, or the room. He found her outside, standing at the edge of the bluff behind the cabin, eyes fixed on the flat line of the horizon. She stood like that for nearly an hour, unmoving, lips parted but voiceless. Her hands clutched each other behind her back except every few minutes. She lifted one, fingers moving in a slow, deliberate count. Thumb. Index. Middle. Ring. Stop. Start again. He didn't interrupt. By the second day, the drifter noticed the watcher. A man with a broad hat pulled low and one eye gone milky, leaning against the church rail as if nailed to it. He was there when the drifter rode into town for supplies, and still there when he left, though he never blinked. Just chewed on a toothpick and watched like he already knew what came next. The preacher was worse. He wouldn't look the drifter in the eye. Not once. His hands trembled as he counted out matches and meal, and when he passed the parcel over the counter, he whispered, "It's not the woman you should fear." He wanted to ask more, but the moment he stepped back, the room emptied. People scattered like papers in wind. No one wanted to be close enough to hear the answers. That night, the hoofbeats came. They started soft, like distant thunder filtered through dry leaves. He sat up straight in bed, hand reaching instinctively for the pistol beneath his pillow. But the sound didn't draw closer. It circled, measured. Always at the same slow gait, hooves pressing into soil like an unseen clock ticking down seconds he couldn't see. She didn't move from her chair. By the third evening, he followed her outside. Not close, just enough to see her silhouette in the dying light, veil drawn back but still unreadable. She never turned, never acknowledged him. Just counted again, lips forming silent numbers. When she returned inside, he noticed it carved low into the wall near the fireplace, half concealed behind a dusty kettle. 5 lines, sharp, deep, one now slashed through. The next morning, only 4 remained. He asked her about it once. Just once. She was spreading water onto a rag, wiping down the sill as if cleaning would keep the storm away. "What are you counting?" he asked. She paused, her fingers curled against the rag. Then she went back to cleaning, slower than before. Each day, the town grew quieter, fewer faces on porches, windows shuttered even in the heat. The man with one eye followed him from storefront to stable, and though he never spoke, the drifter could feel something in his stare, a kind of mourning that hadn't happened yet. The fourth night, the hoofbeats came louder. Closer. They stopped just past the tree line. The silence that followed was heavier than thunder. That was when he saw her, pressed against the glass, eyes wet not with fear but memory. He turned and looked at the wall. 3 lines now. The fifth evening came like the edge of a blade, sharp, cold, and impossible to ignore. The sky turned a deeper shade of rust as the sun dragged its heels over the horizon, reluctant to leave the earth to what was coming. The hoofbeats had not yet started, but the drifter could feel them in his chest already, the phantom echo of inevitability. His hand hovered over the carving near the fireplace. Only 2 lines remained now. One more and the last would be his. She hadn't spoken since the wedding night. He found her where she always was, just past the bluff behind the cabin, standing still against the dying light like part of the land itself. This time, he didn't hang back. This time he walked straight to her. "I want the truth," he said. She didn't turn. He stepped closer. No more counting. No more silence. What am I standing in the middle of? The wind tugged at the ends of her veil, but she didn't move. "I deserve to know," he said, voice low but breaking now. "I've stayed. I've listened to your silence. Watched this town rot around its own secrets. I'm not a man fond of running, but I ain't fond of dying blind either." At last, she turned her head. "You are the 7th, she said. The words landed without ceremony, flat and final. She looked at him now, no veil, no barrier. Just bare eyes like storm glass, and a voice like cracked porcelain. "There were 6 before you. All of them took the ring. All of them stayed until the 5th night, and all of them died when the rider came." The drifter didn't move, his jaw set. "You set me up. I begged them to run," she said. "You're the first I asked to stay." He laughed once dry, humorless. "That's supposed to comfort me?" "No," she said quietly. "It's supposed to tell you this one's different." A silence opened between them, wide and heavy. He stared at her face, the kind of beauty forged by hardship, not soft, but worn, enduring. There was grief in it, yes, but not regret. She had made her choices. So had he. "What happens if I leave?" he asked. "You live," she said. "And you?" She looked down. "I die. By sunrise." He closed his eyes. Just for a moment. The wind rose again, carrying the scent of ironwood and something older, something wrong. The drifter turned toward the cabin, where the light from the window flickered like it was already struggling to survive the night. His fingers brushed the ring on his hand, still cold. He faced her again. "You made a bargain with something you couldn't repay." "I was 16, she said. "I didn't know the cost." He nodded. "Well, now I do." She took a step back, unsure. Hope, maybe, flickered across her brow. "If saving you means dying," he said slowly, "I need to know something." She waited. "Is it worth it?" Tears rimmed her eyes but didn't fall. "Not to me," she whispered. He didn't answer. Not yet. Instead, he turned to the open air and let the silence settle again. "Would you run now, or finish what you started?" The 3rd night, the storm didn't come. The sky was too still for comfort, the clouds hanging above like breath held too long. The crickets were silent, the owls absent. Even the wind seemed to hold its tongue, as though the land itself feared to speak. They were sitting in silence again. The drifter had given up on asking her anything. After the night before, after what she had told him, what she hadn't told him, there was nothing more to say. He had kept the ring on his finger. That choice alone had become louder than words. When the hoofbeats came, they weren't echoes anymore. They were here, sharp, deliberate. One step at a time, like the countdown of a hangman's drop. The drifter stepped outside first, pistol in hand, eyes already drawn toward the ridge above the cabin. And there he was. The rider sat astride a black horse, still as bone. No lantern, no light, no sound from the beast beneath him. Just the silhouette of a man, or what passed for one. His hat brim shadowed his face entirely, and yet the drifter could feel the absence beneath it. Not hidden, missing. No mouth to speak with, no eyes to plead to. Just a shape wrapped in black, as if grief had taken the form of a man and never left the saddle. He didn't move, didn't raise a weapon. He just waited. The drifter raised his gun, finger to the trigger, but the woman stepped forward and laid a hand on the barrel. "He won't strike first," she said. He glanced at her. Her face was calm, but her hand trembled where it touched his. "Then what is he waiting for?" She stared at the rider. "You. What does he want?" Her voice was almost too soft to hear. "He comes for who wears the ring." He looked down at his hand. The silver band shimmered faintly under the moonlight, the strange etchings glowing like old fire, like language carved into stone by something that had never known love or sleep. "He's not after me," the drifter said slowly. "He's after you. I'm just the bait." She didn't deny it. "I made a vow," she said, eyes still fixed on the rider. "I was young, my brothers were dying, my land was dying. I went to the old place in the canyon, and I begged. Something answered." The drifter's stomach turned cold. "He promised to protect me," she whispered. "But not for free. I didn't know what it meant until the first man took my hand. Then the rider came. Every time, he takes the one who wears the ring. Every time, I stay alive." He took a step back from her. "So I'm your offering. You're my hope," she said. "Because the curse can only break when one man stays knowing what's coming and still chooses not to run." He stared at her. "And if he does?" She turned to him fully now. "Then the rider faces me. For the first time." The drifter looked back to the ridge. The rider hadn't moved, but the horse was breathing heavier now, mist clouding around its nostrils. It was waiting for his choice, not to fight. To leave. He looked at the trail, then at her, then back at the thing on the ridge. And he stayed. For now. They gathered in the dusk without being called. No lanterns marked their path, no voices heralded their arrival. Just the soft thud of worn boots in the dust, the shuffle of skirts heavy with years, and the crackle of joints stiff from time and silence. They came from the edge of town, from the hills beyond the creek, from cabins tucked so far into the pines that even the wind forgot them. A half circle of bent backs and steady eyes, their presence more ritual than visitation. The drifter stood on the porch with the bride beside him, arms crossed tight over her chest, eyes lowered, not in shame but in waiting. She had seen this before. They had not come for her. They had come for him. He stepped forward, the ring on his finger pulsing like a coal left too long in the fire. It burned now, not metaphor, not memory, but pain. A pain that pulsed with something older than nerves. It had no center, no edge. Just the relentless pressure of a story repeating itself through flesh. "I want to take her place," he said, his voice rough from sleepless nights and too many questions left unanswered. "Whatever deal she made, it's done now. I'm here. I know the cost. Let him come for me and leave her." The women said nothing. Not one. He held up his hand, the ring glowing red, the etched symbols now swirling faintly, as if stirred by unseen breath. "I wear it. That makes it mine." One of the old women finally stepped forward, her eyes cloudy but locked on him with surgical precision. She reached out and took his wrist gently, as if feeling the truth beneath the skin. Then she turned to the bride. The bride stepped forward without a word and raised her hand. There, burned into her palm, was the same mark. Not the ring. The brand. It wasn't a scar. It was alive. A symbol scorched into her by the deal she made, two intersecting spirals, one red, one black, and always faintly moving, as if drawn from smoke and blood. The old woman nodded, then spoke. "If he stays until the 5th night," she said, "and does not run, the rider will come." The others murmured, now low, rhythmic, like wind through grave grass. "If he meets the rider's eyes and does not fall," she continued, "the curse breaks, the vow ends, she lives free." The drifter's voice caught in his throat. "And if I run?" "Then it begins again," the woman said, turning back. "For another man, another ring." He looked to the bride. Her face was unreadable, not because she didn't feel, but because she had learned how not to show it. Too many failures. Too many funerals. "But if I stay," he said, quieter now, "I might not live through the 5th night." "No one has," the woman replied. The circle stepped back. The judgment was not one of permission, it was acknowledgement. They weren't here to bless the choice, only to witness it. The sky darkened, no birds sang. The wind held its breath. And the rider waited. The 5th night broke with thunder, not distant this time, but immediate and full-bellied, like the sky had split open just to mark the hour. Lightning forked against the hills beyond the ridge, and the trees bowed low, their branches creaking in warning. Rain had not yet come, but the scent of it hung thick in the air, wet iron, scorched dust, and something older, something wrong. The drifter stood alone outside the cabin, his boots planted in the cracked soil, his coat flapping open in the wind. No pistol. No knife. Just his breath steaming in the cold, and the sound of his own heartbeat thudding in his ears like a war drum. Behind him, the cabin door remained closed. She had not asked him to stay inside. He hadn't needed to be told. He waited, and the storm waited with him. Then came the sound, hoofbeats, slow and deliberate, echoing from the dark between trees like nails tapping on wood. One by one, they drew closer, never hurried, never veering. The rhythm of certainty, the sound of inevitability. The rider emerged from the black like smoke given form. Horse slick with shadow, reins loose, and on its back sat the same figure, hat low, shoulders draped in cloth that didn't flutter though the wind whipped wild around them. The same faceless hush beneath that brim. The same silence that pressed against the world like the moment before drowning. But tonight was different. The drifter didn't reach for his weapon. He didn't speak. He simply raised his hand, fingers trembling, and pulled the silver ring from his finger. It came off easy now, no resistance, no heat, just metal grown cold with time and blood. He turned to the fire he'd built low in the yard, no higher than a lantern's breadth. And with one final look at the etching that had brought him here, the spiral now dull, lifeless, almost pitiful, he tossed the ring into the flames. It didn't melt, it screamed. Not with sound, but with air and space. The wind surged backward, trees bending away. The fire hissed blue for a heartbeat, then died to ember. The sky exhaled like it had been holding in 5 years of grief. The drifter turned back to the rider. He took a step forward, unarmed, unflinching. "I'm not running," he said. The rider stopped. The horse stomped once. The silence curled tighter. And then for the first time, the drifter saw it. Beneath the hat, where nothing had lived before, there were eyes. Not hollow, not cruel. Just tired. Endless and sad, like the stars mourned in their own language. He held that gaze. Did not blink, did not speak. And slowly, the rider reached up, touched the brim of his hat, and vanished. No smoke, no burst, just gone. The wind stopped, the thunder passed. The night returned to itself, hollow and lightless. He staggered once, knees nearly buckling, but caught himself. The cabin door opened. She stepped out barefoot, dress clinging to her like dawnlight. The mark on her palm was gone. She looked at him, eyes wide and full for the first time in years, and whispered, "My name is Leda." He smiled just slightly, then collapsed to the earth, face tilted to the stars. Still breathing. Still alive. The rains came in the weeks that followed, soft and steady like an apology from the sky. Where the earth had once been dry and cracked, green began to push through, slow at first, hesitant, as if the land itself didn't yet believe it was safe to grow. But it grew. The trees thickened. The creek, once a thin vein of dust, filled again with water cold and clear. The town, long shuttered in silence and fear, began to show signs of breath. Doors opened. Children laughed. Horses whinnied not in panic, but in boredom. At the edge of that quiet revival, the cabin stood. It had been rebuilt plank by plank, the drifter working with his sleeves rolled and sweat marking his shirt dark along the spine. He moved slowly, still, sometimes with a limp on wet days, a reminder of that fifth night when his body had come so close to leaving him behind. But he lived, and every board he hammered into place, every nail sunk into wood, carried the weight of something reclaimed. Not survival, not exactly, something older than that, something earned. Leda, she used her name now, had taken to the soil. Each morning she knelt beside 7 wooden crosses planted in a half-moon curve along the bluff behind the house. No names on them, just time-carved wood and 7 small blooms. Ghost lilies, white and trembling, planted in neat rows at the base of each grave. She didn't speak when she tended them. She hummed sometimes, low and wordless, a tune that never quite resolved. It wasn't sadness in her voice. It was memory and thanks. She never explained where she'd learned the song. They didn't talk much about the writer. Some stories don't need retelling when they still breathe in the quiet spaces. But the drifter kept the scorched ring in a box buried deep beneath the floorboards. Not because he feared it returning, but because some tokens are meant to stay buried, weight pressed against soil, so the living can forget the shape of death's hand. He built a porch with a view of the hills and took to sitting there at dusk, cup in hand, watching the horizon. Not waiting, not anymore, just watching. And when the wind passed through the trees now, it spoke of nothing but rain and leaves. One evening, as the first stars appeared, Leda came to sit beside him. She didn't speak for a long time. Just leaned her shoulder against his and stared out toward the line of graves glowing pale in the moonlight. "You never asked why I chose you," she said at last. He didn't answer right away, just took her hand in his and let the silence stretch. "You didn't flinch," she added. "That first day. Not when they offered, not when they warned you. You didn't run." He looked out over the land he'd almost died for, the cabin they'd rebuilt, the life they were learning, day by day, to live. "Love didn't save me," he said softly, "but mercy did." The wind shifted again, quieter now, calmer. But did the curse truly break, or just move on?